Again, so this week is Chav Beishvat. We'll talk about Chaya Mushka, as we'll see different dinim and different pratim in Tanakh and different places in the Beis Hamikdash and according to Chassidus as well. So, first of all, just to point out that a majority of the shir is based off an essay, or if you will, written by Rabbi Isaac Shvei, and he has a sefer called Kisvei Rabbi Isaac, and it's really a letter that he wrote. It seems like he wrote it to a chaver. If you open up the sefer Kisvei Rabbi Isaac, you'll see the shtickle over there. It seems like he's writing to his friend that he just came back from Nichum Avelim after Rebbe Simchai Mushka passed away. And he's writing to his friend about, he did some research about the source of the name Chaya Mushka. I was told that really the Rebbe asked him to do the research, and he wrote it on the Rebbe's bakasha, not just on his own. But what's more interesting and fascinating is that the entire letter that he wrote, his words, are found in Sefer HaSichos Tov Shin Nun, in the Ha'orah of a Sicha, even though seemingly that's, as far as we know, the Sichos are, the Rebbe wrote everything, but it seems from there that it's pushed word for word, copy-paste. I'm not sure where it was published first, either in his Sefer or it's published first over there. But B'cholifin, it's so a lot of what we're saying now is going to be based on that. So first of all, he brings a svara to say, where does the name Mushka come from? Most of the names that we have, if they're names in Hebrew, we know that it's based on Tanakh, but the name Mushka is obviously not a Hebrew name. So there are many names that come from other languages, and Zev Wolf and Zvi Hirsch, but those names we know exactly what they mean, a Wolf and a Hirsch. But when it comes to the name Mushka, so it obviously comes from not from Lashon Kodesh. The question is, where does it come from? What does it mean? So the first svara that he brings, it is a type of nut called egoiz mushkat, a nutmeg, and this is the picture of what it looks like. So he brings a svara to say that maybe that's where the name comes from, because there are names named after fruit and spices. So that's a svara that it could be from there. But and where's the test? So obviously, just like many names that over time they evolved and they changed, so it could be the letter test was dropped along the way, and that's where the name comes from. But the bulk of what he wants to say is that it comes from that the source for Mushka is somewhere else. And that's based off on the Gemara in Brachas Tafam Gimel Amud Aleph. The Gemara there says, Amar Rav Chizda Amar Rav, Amri La Amar Rav Chizda Amar Zeiri, Kol HaMugmoris, all perfumes, Mevarchin Alein Beirei Atzei B'samim. You make a bracha on them, you make the bracha Beirei Atzei B'samim, because it comes from trees or from bushes, Chutz Mi Mushk. And the Rif writes, instead of Mushk, he writes Mushka. So here's the name Mushka as we know it. The Rif writes exactly that same word. And the Gemara says that on the mushka, the bracha that you make on it, since shemin chayahu, it's a type of animal, therefore the mugmar, the perfume, the scent that comes from it, marvarchin alav beirei min b'samim. You make a bracha on it, beirei min b'samim, not atzei b'samim, beirei min b'samim. We know that there are different brachas. We just had Matzah Shabbos, we had beirei min b'samim, but really there's beirei atzei b'samim, beirei isvei b'samim, anisim reach teva peris, a different lashonis, different for nuschayis for the bracha. The most common nusach that we always say is beirei min b'samim, because a lot of times we're not sure. In the halachas of brachas, just like by foods, if you have a suffix, you say shahakol niya b'dvarei. So too when it comes to by b'samim, if you have a suffix, you say beirei min b'samim. But here we see there's something called a mushk. So what exactly is this mushk? What is this chaya that the Gemara is talking about that's called a mushk that gives a good smell? So by pastures, all of the Mefarshim agree that it's a type of deer that's called the musk deer. The same name that it has in the Gemara's times, mushk or musk. That's the same name till today, the musk deer, the Siberian musk deer. There's a few other type of subspecies. And even though it's called a deer and it looks like a deer, but it's according to the scientists, it's considered a separate species. So by looking at the picture, the obvious difference is the teeth or fangs coming out of its mouth. That's a feature that you can see right away by looking at it. It's also officially slightly smaller than a regular deer. But what really makes it stick out and different than everything else is the smell that comes from it, as we'll see weiter the pratim, where exactly the smell comes from and pratim about it. So the Torah, when he brings the sugya about this bracha beirei min b'samim, so he writes b'chlai hakdam in general birkas hareach when it comes to bracha and smell, keshem she'osher lahonis b'achilu b'shtiyat she'ivarach. Just like it's forbidden to have ano of any kind of food or drink before you make a bracha, kach osher lahonis mereach tevat she'ivarach. So too, you cannot have ano from a smell before you make a bracha. And he continues, v'yivarech koydem hareach. You have to make a bracha beforehand. Kamesha mevarech ala oichel koydem ha'achila. Aval ha'acharav, after the smell, ein tzarich levarech klum. Unlike by food, where there's a bracha achreina, by smells there's no bracha achreina, and that's not the place for now to discuss the reason. But al kopanim, this is the Torah writes this. And he continues details. The Ketzad Mevarich, what kind of bracha do you make on it? So he says, if it comes from a tree or something connected to the tree, Mevarich Beirei Atzib Samim. V'imu Esav is if a type of grass or like a smaller bush, Mevarich Beirei Isveib Samim. And he says, if it's not from a tree, not from a bush, like the smoir shehu min chaya, in that case, mevarich beire mine besamim. Then you make the bracha of beire mine besamim, which was based on the Gemara. And then the Torah continues. The Torah writes, Hoyil va'asa liyodon neima bei milsa. Since we just spoke about this moir, let's talk about it and add some more details, which is an interesting thing, because the Torah, his main thing is to talk about halacha, and now in this siman, he's talking about the halachas of brachas of the smell. But he has the opportunity, now that we're talking about it anyway, let's talk about more details about this moir. So he says, Yesh Oimrim Shu Zeyas Chaya. There are some that say that it's the sweat of a certain animal. So when humans sweat, obviously sweat does not smell good at all, but every animal has a different type of sweat. So some people say that the moir is some kind of animal which when it sweats, it has a good smell, and then you somehow collect that sweat and turn it into a scent, and that's what make the Baruch HaBeiri Midipsami. Says the Torah, I don't think so. To me, the pshat is as follows: Shechaya yeduahi, it's a known animal. V'yeshlo kemin chatoitris b'tzavora, has like these chatoitris, like these little how do you say chatoitris, like a hump or a bump, these little bumps in its neck. Umiskabit shom tchila kemin dam, and first in that little thing, there's a blood collects over there. And then it dries up. And from that chatoitris, from that, in the picture you see what it looks like, that little ball which is on the bottom of the deer, so that first it gets filled with blood in the lifetime of the deer, and then that blood dries up, and then from that, after it dries up, they harvest it, and that's what they make the moir into. That's where the moir comes, not from the sweat, but from these what's called pods on the musk deer's body. Well, we'll talk more pratim about that afterwards. So the main discussion is regarding the smell of it. However, what about eating it? So a lot of times when something smells good, you want to eat it. Often something smells good and it does not taste good. So regarding eating it, so he brings the harameh, one of the Rishonim, he said you're not allowed to eat it. Why? Because it was blood before. So even though now it dried up, but since it was blood, so it retains the isser of blood, and even though it might be a kosher animal, as we'll see later, nevertheless it's usher to eat. I have a svara that you're allowed to eat the musk as well. I mean, not some of the musk pods. This picture of the pod is permitted to eat. Why? The pirsha ba'almahu, it's just perish. And perish, something which is basically with garbage and disgusting, there's no problem to eat it. And he says, even though it started off as blood, and blood is asur, the basar hashtaz lina. Rabbeinu Yoina says, I don't care where it comes from, I don't care how it is now. Right now, is it edible? No. Right now, it's perish. So if so, it doesn't have a din of blood. So it's a machlekes, the Ramen Rabbeinu Yoina. The Rabbeinu Yoina continues, Teidav araya that it's mutter. So he brings a very interesting concept. He says, Dvash, if a piece of something not kosher falls into blood, to dvash, to honey, and then the dvar isur, let's say it's a fly or something, dissolves into the honey, and he continues, the way of honey is that if something falls into honey, it turns into honey. Over time, it so to speak deteriorates, and the pasha dissolves and turns into honey mamish. And the halacha, says Rabbeinu Yena, is dainina leikmei dvash. Even though it started off as a fly, which is not kosher, now that it dissolved and turned into dvash, we go by the way it is now. Says Rabbeinu Yena, hachanami, afal bishat chilosa hayadam, basar hashtaz linon. Even though it started off as blood, we look at it the way it is now. Now it's perish, so now it's mutter. This is the raya of Rabbeinu Yena to say that the musk blood is or scent is permitted. However, the Torah continues, the Rosh writes, the Torah is writing this, so he's writing, my father, the Rosh writes about Rabbeinu Yoina, he says, first of all, I think that the blood, that over here, that this musk remains also because it was blood, and you bring me a raya from Dvash, I'm not so sure you're right. Maybe even the Dvash, if a fly falls into Dvash, into honey, and even though it turns into honey afterwards, I'm not so sure that it's still kosher, that you go by the way it was originally. So this is what the So you have the machlekes now between the Rosh and the Rameh. They both say that it's Asur, and the Rabbeinu Yoina says that it's Mutter. In the Achroinim, so the Taz writes, Ulanias daiti, I don't understand what the machlekes is. Do yesh raya brura lehet, I have a clear raya that this mushka is mutter. Why is it mutter? Because he brings a raya from what the Rosh himself writes, b'seif perek kol habasar, b'chol of treifa, b'me'eik sheda, which means if you have a baby calf that is nursing from its mother cow, but the mother cow is treif, meaning the mother cow is going to die within 12 months and has some kind of illness or some kind of makkah. So the milk coming from the mother cow is not kosher. A cow that went through a procedure. So we spoke about this in other shiurim about the DA cows. In a cow that's going to die, its milk is not kosher. However, if the baby calf is nursing from the mother cow, the cost of Rabbeinu Tam, then now if I take the baby calf and I shecht it, and I opened up its stomach, and I find the milk that it drank from its mother. Says Rabbeinu Tam, the imu korush havikipirusha ba'alma. If the milk that's now in the baby's stomach is now solid, is now congealed, it's considered perish. So says the Taz, just like over there, we know this milk started off from the not kosher cow. And now, since it's kodesh, since it's perish, it's mutter, says the Taz, im ken hachinami. So too in this case, kevan shenikrash ala behema, since this blood on the mushka already became kodesh, became pirsha, while it was on the musk deer's body, the mali toicha behema el gabehema. Who cares if it became pirsha inside the baby calf's stomach or on the body of the deer? So the Taz by him, it's clear, like the Rabbeinu Yoino, that the musk is mutter ba'achila. The Mogen Avram says just the opposite. He says, "La'nias daid tzarachil." The Amrin mebchiras davav. The Gemara says over there, the chol of chiddush b'chlal wa'aytachin milk is mutter. So he says that really it's a chiddush that milk is kosher. When you buy milk, you're buying a liquid from the cow. Where does the cow have milk from? The cow doesn't drink milk. The cow is eating food. And the food that the cow eats is processed and turns into blood of the cow. And then that blood turns into the milk. So says the Gemara, it's a special chiddush. That dafka by milk, the Torah says you're allowed to drink the milk, even though it started off as blood. So the basar meikara as lina. So from that Gemara we see that only by milk we say this chiddush that we go by the way it was original, by the way it is now. Where everything else, since it started off as blood, it's kolosser. If you want to learn from milk, the rule is that if the Torah makes a special chiddush in one place, you can't learn from there to everywhere else. So the Magen Avram, in other words, sides with the Rameh, with the Rosh, that they both say that it's asur because since it was blood originally, it remains blood now as well. The Alter Rebbe in Birchas Hanenin writes on this halacha. He starts with "V'kol she'enoi loy min eitz v'loy min esev k'goyin hamoir v'hu musk." The moir is musk, and he says she'koyin pizum b'loshen acher. Not sure what I didn't find this lashon pizum anywhere else. Akopanim, the Alter Rebbe continues that this scent comes from the pods on the neck or on the bottom of the body of this known animal. Says the Alter Rebbe, the bracha you make is by the minibsom, like the Torah said. Alter Rebbe continues, and it is forbidden to eat it. You cannot put it into your food and say, I want to taste this, I want to have it in my taste as well. Because the Alter Rebbe is chayshish to the opinion of the Magen Avram and the Rosh and the Rameh. However, the Alter Rebbe continues, v'yesh matirin, as we saw the yesh matirin of the Rabbeinu Yoina and the Taz. The Alter Rebbe says, what should you do? Ubal nefesh yachmir la'atzmei b'sofik shel Torah. After the Rebbe says this is a sofik deiraisa, that maybe this is taka blood, and blood is a isur deiraisa to eat. So the Alter Rebbe therefore concludes that it's also. So the maskana sadvarim, the mushka, as of now, the bracha you make on the smell is clear. If you want to eat it or not, it's a machlekes, a rishonim, machlekes, a paiskim. The Alter Rebbe says a bal nefesh should be machmir not to eat it. We continue the next conversation regarding Chaya Mushka b'mikra. Where in Tanakh do we have the word Mushka? So the word Mushka we do not have in Tanakh anywhere. However, the word Moir, as we saw the Rishonim called the Mushka Moir, we do find in Tanakh. Where in Tanakh? So there's a famous pasuk we all just finished learning in Basi Legani for Yud Shvat. The pasuk begins Basi Legani Achisi Kala. That the Eibishter is saying, I came to my garden, my sister, my bride. But most Bachim probably didn't see the Hemshech of the pasuk where it says that Arisi Moiri im Besami. At the pasuk continues, Arisi Moiri. Psami means psamim, perfumes. What does Arisi Moiri mean? So the Mitzudis explains HaChoshuk sholach dvorei v'koyomar. The Choshuk is the Eibishter sending his message to the Yidden and says, Kain es, this is what I'm going to do. V'amahir lovei lagan shehechantli. I'm coming to the garden that you prepared for me, which we learned in the Maimer, that it means the Beis HaMikdash, the Avida V'skafia. And over there, va'alakit hamoir, I'm going to collect. Orisi, tight, what does Orisi means? I'm going to collect the moir. Im sh'or minei aboisim sheiz mantli, with the other perfumes. So here we see the pasuk is saying moir, Orisi moir, which means I'm going to collect the moir, collecting the perfume. So the Metzudash gives a simple pshat of what it means, that collecting the, but he doesn't discuss Bechlal, why the Lashon Orisi, and doesn't discuss more details about the moir itself. He just relies on us that we know that the moir is the Mushka. The Even Ezra brings on this pasuk and he says that Araya that is taka the musk, the murder in this pasuk, because the pasuk separates it. Murder in besami. Why all the perfumes are included in the word besami? Why dafke do you say this one separately? So he says because the musk is so much different than everything else. Why? So one of the reasons in our language is because it's so much more expensive. This is a real. If you want to buy actual original the musk grains, this is a half a gram. If you see where the cursor is. $67.99 for a half a gram of musk deer. I don't know how much a gram is. Yeah, it's a tiny amount. If you want a little bit bigger one, so if you want to have a whole Siberian musk deer, which is weighing 38 grams. 38 grams. It's I don't know how to say it. It shows like a box of matches. So it's going to cost you $1,300 and $325. So that's very, very expensive, as you can understand. So Even Ezra says that's where the pasuk separates it. All other perfumes are nowhere near as expensive. So B'meila, this is a raya that says the Even Ezra that the moed in this pasuk is indeed talking about the musk. However, the problem is what's lashon oira. Oira means harvesting, picking from a tree. When it comes to harvesting things, in Lashon Kodesh there are different words for it. There's koitzer, there's boitzer, there's moisek. Every different, many fruit or many different type of things or grains have their own word to use them. So the word oira is usually used for figs for whatever reason it is. But kopanim, it's not talking about it's not talking about an animal. It's talking about from a plant. So this is one big kasha on the Even Ezra's pshat, which lochid is a simple pshat. At the moed is talking about the mushk. So the question is he says this is the Hamshach of the question. This is the Ramban asked the question. He says so if it's on the garden, the throat or the bottom of the tzvi, it's not considered oida. So if so, this is the question of Even Ezra. So the Ramban answers and he says v'yitochen shayomer arisi moiri bavur ki udam nitzra rebetna chaya doimel tzvi ado be'eretz hoidu. Here he says where it's found in India, in those countries. That's where they found this the musk deer. So it says the Ramban ubelechto bein hasichim, when the musk deer walks between bushes b'mei achoim agodo, when it's too hot megaredes benefachahu, then it rubs the pod against the branches. V'adam, or whatever this blood or whatever this liquid is inside the pod, yotzei tzorur, it ends up remaining on the branches. V'loikti ma'isei min ha'achu, and then people go and they collect it from the trees. So it says the Ramban, this could be an answer to the question we asked. How can you call it meiri? How are you saying orisi, harvesting from a tree, if it's really on the animal's body? So this is the answer, because they get it sometimes from the branches where the animal walked by. So this could be an answer why it's called orisi meiri. Another place where we find the word moir is in Shmois, which now the parashas we're starting now, so coming up this is Mishpatim, but soon Trumat Tetzava will have all the Beis HaMikdash and all the stuff. So in Parashas Kisisa, when it talks about the Shem and HaMishcha, over there it says, Hashem tells Moshe Rabbeinu, Kach lecha b'samim roish, you should take perfumes, and the first one of them is Mor Deroir. And how much? Chamesh meyes. And he continues with other types of perfumes, spices you're supposed to bring for the Shem and Mishcha, and as we'll see later, it's also for the Ketores as well. So we have the Mor Droir. So here it says the word Mor, and it has the word Droir as well. What does this Droir mean exactly? Psalm Reish means the most chashuv perfume we saw before. Why? Because the Mushka is so expensive, it's so special. But what's this Droir all about? So it's brought down. The Even Ezra says, "Droir miloshin ukrosim droir sheyachavshi min aziyu v'ta'arevis." It shouldn't be fake. It should be pure, authentic musk. It shouldn't be a fake one. That's what Hashem told Moshe Rabbeinu. And the more you make sure it should be a real one, not a fake one. This is taka. You can imagine if something so tiny cost over $1,000, then obviously there's a lot of fakes in the market. And here in the pictures you can see on the left side pictures of a fake musk deer pod, and on the right side a real musk deer pod. And versteht sich, someone that doesn't know these things, the difference between them, they look very similar. And what they do is the people in India, the people that try to cheat other people. So they take skin and hair from cattle, and they put different oils and different perfumes, and they put it inside, and then they sell it as if it's the real musk pot. So versteht sich that obviously anything which is expensive is always going to be cheap fakes that are going to try to rip people off. So Al-Derech is already Moshe Rabbeinu's times. The Rebbe tells them it should be more droir. It should be one that's not fake. It should be a real one. That's Even Ezra's pshat. The Ramban says, "Ulay noimar sheitzrich hakosov liyesei chavshi." It should be droir means free. Loimar sheyukach min atzviahu b'yesei chavshi. It should be a free roaming deer, but when it's mishalech ben arugis absamim musanik irtzoyne, not in captivity. Ki kasher yilochid v'yamid b'rshus adam, because if a person is going to capture it and raise it in captivity, lo yasa moir ki ima'at v'enena mavusam. It's going to be a very small amount in the pod, and it won't be as well. V'zed overbody. The Ramban says this from the Ramban as I say the truth is. But I was looking into it. If it's something so expensive, there must be people that have farms where they raise the musk there. So I found out that there were people that tried doing it. They tried capturing a whole bunch of live musk there and breeding it in a farm, and this way they'll be able to sell it for a lot more expensive. What happened was that when they made this farm and they had the musk in captivity, exactly like the Ramban says. The Ramban was close to 1,000 years ago, yeah. But that exactly what the Ramban says. It made a very small amount of murder, and Bechal wasn't the same quality. So they dropped the whole plan, and the only way they do it today is in the wild. They go and they poach them and they kill them, and then they take the pods, and then they produce the musk perfume from that. So Mamela, this is the mordroi. So we have in the pasuk two descriptions about the moir: Arisi moiri and the word mordroi. So the Arisi moiri we explain because it sometimes walks next to the trees, and the mordroi because it's only when it's wild. This is the way the Even Ezra and most Mefarshim explain. However, the Ramban himself, even though he's the one that explained this pshat to defend Even Ezra, he says, "V'im kol ze ani relai midivid Rabbeinu she'ein hamoir musk." He says, no, moir is not musk. Even though I just explained how I can differentiate that indeed Arisi moiri is taka musk. However, I don't think so. Why not? Sheheim omru b'medrash chazis moir in maranun. He said in the Medrash when it talks about the moir about the Beis Hamikdash, what's mentioned in this pasuk, they give it a different name. The Mushka we saw in the Gemara earlier, the Gemara calls it Mushka. So why is the Medrash giving it a different name in Marinun? So even though I touched out how Moir could be so, says the Ramban, V'akoriv sho'anikra came beloshen Aravi Moir sheyesh menu minin. And if you see on the bottom left, this is the real name for it. Myrrh in English also, it is a type of flower, an herb, which is called myrrh. Mamish myrrh, the same word from the Torah. And that's what the Ramban said to the Medrash. He says, the Ramban says, Mushka, what the Gemara is talking about, that's Taka Mushka, that's Beirim in Ibsamim, and the whole machlekes of the Rabbeinu Yonah Gesundheit. But don't connect it to the Pasuk Arisi Moiri. The Alter Rebbe, we saw the Alter Rebbe does say it's myrrh. The Torah says it's myrrh as well. So the Ramban says, no, it's not myrrh. Myrrh of the Torah is something not connected to Mushka. It's this type of herb called myrrh. So it's not that's according to the Ramban. So we have a machlekes, basically the Ramban and most of the Mefarshim, what is the myrrh? Is the myrrh taka the Mushka or not? The next discussion regarding the Chaya, the Mushka, is regarding in the Beis Hamikdash, as we mentioned, that the myrrh was used for the Shem and Amishka and also for the Ketores. So the Rambam in Hilchos Klei HaMikdash, when he talks about all the ingredients that are used for the Ketores and the ingredients that are used for the Shem and Amishka, he writes, what is this myrrh? It's a type of blood which is coming from this animal in Hoidu. Everybody knows what it is. People use it for perfume all over the place, and that's what was used in the Beis Hamikdash as well, according to the Rambam. Comes the Ravid, and the Ravid says, "Ein daiti mekabele sheyachnisu b'maisei hakodesh dam shum chaya ba'olam kol shekein dam chaya tmeya." The Ravid says it doesn't make sense to me that they're going to bring into the Beis Hamikdash blood of any animal, kol shekein if it's blood of a chaya tmeya. What's chaya tmeya? So here the Ravid's already implying to us that the musk deer might be a non-kosher animal. Now that's not understood at all, because the musk deer. So even though some scientists say it's not in the family of deer, but it definitely chews its cud and it has split hooves. So b'meila it should be kosher. So what's the Ravid saying? So the Ravid doesn't address the question at all. The Ravid seemingly just learns, like the Ramban, that moed is the myrrh, and what about the mushka? That's the Gemara. No connection to the Beis Hamikdash. What's the asbaras hamachloikis between them? I'm sorry. This is Hamshach of the Divrei Aravid. The Aravid continues. Amoyru Omer Shir Hashirim Basi Legani Achisikal Risi Meridim Sami V'min Esev V'min Ilam V'Reichenit. Like we said before, this is actually a picture of the myrrh. Looks like after it's processed, they make it into this either liquid or the pieces. That's what. So again, the Aravid and the Ramban are the ones that hold that myrrh of the Torah is the myrrh. It's something else. It's not the mushka. But what's the asbaras of machlek between the Rambam and the Aravid? So the first way of explaining it is that the Rambam holds that even though it was blood originally, now it's already pirshan. You can see the way it looks now. This is after it's being processed. It really doesn't look like blood or anything close to blood. And Fashteitzach and such a thing, it loses, like we said before, the Svar is to say that the musk after it's processed in the mushkas in the body of the deer, it's not treif anymore. It's not considered blood anymore. So that same Svara, the Rambam would say here also, even though it was blood, but now already it was completely changed, and therefore it's not a problem of bringing it into Beis Hamikdash because it's not treif anymore, it's not tum anymore, and it can be part of the Ketores of the Sheba Mishka. And the Ravid will say that nevertheless it's still Asr, either because it's not a real Shinoi, or because the other Sfaras that we said that Basar Mei Korda as Linon, we go by the way it was originally. So Koponim, this could be one way of explaining that the Ravid says, because the Ravid said two things. He said even if it's a kosher animal, I don't want to be in blood. And second of all, it's a koshkin chaya tameya. So the first thing that the Ravid says it's blood, but l'chayr it's not blood anymore. So the Ravid must say, like the other Rishonim that we said, that the Rosh and the Rameh, that we go by the way it was originally. And the other way of explaining the machlokes is with pashtus that the Rambam says it's a kosher animal, and the Ravid says it's a non-kosher animal. He says the myrrh. So we're going to see. I'll have pictures in a little bit about what other animal might it be that the Ravid is talking about, because the Ravid doesn't address what it is. The Ravid just says it's not mushka and it's myrrh. So in Maskana we have a machlekes regarding if the mushka was used in the Beis Hamikdash or not. According to the Rambam, it was used, and according to the Ravid, it was not used. And l'chayra, or the same machlekes, all the Rishonim that say that moir was indeed this from the mushka, then it was used in the Beis Hamikdash, and the Ravid and the Ramban say that it was not used in the Beis Hamikdash. The last discussion will be about Chaya Mushka in Chassidus, which is also brought down by Rabbi Shvei. He brings this from a Maimer. So in Torah Oir, the Alter Rebbe talks about it. And regarding Purim, we're talking about the Purim now also. The Alter Rebbe brings about Mordechai. Mordechai is called the Ish Yehudi. Ish means a Sar, coming Ish Arabayis. And the reason why it was called the Sar of Yehudim, because Yehudi is connected to Bittul, and Mordechai is the mocker of Bittul. What about Kesher Mordechai and Bittul? K'maymer Azal. The Gemara says, Mordechai min ha-Torah minayin. Mordechai is mentioned in Megillas Esther. We're in Chumash to have episode Remes from Mordechai. Says the Gemara, Dichsiv Morderoir. Morderoir is the same word as Mordechai, similar, but more than that, umetargeminan mirodachya. So mirodachya, Mordechai is mamish, almost the same letters. So that's the source of Mordechai in the Torah. So the Indian of Mordechai is the Indian of mirodachya, and as Al Rebbe will soon explain, ma kesher mirodachya, the Indian of Bittul. What is this moir? So the Alter Rebbe brings over, this is quoting from the Alter Rebbe over here in Torah. Umoir ze, ledas haramba mushar mefarshim hu, he adds, rak harayvet v'rambam pirshu binyan acher. But the Rambam and the other mefarshim say, it's mush kanizker b'gemara paraketzat mevarchen. Now we start off the shir with quoting that Gemara. Shudam chay yadua shenikrash b'chatetere shebetzavara, v'nasa beisem anikra mer. So first of all, the Alter Rebbe says, before I explain to you Chassidus, why is miradach bittul, I just want to tell you what is this moir. The moir according to the Rambam and other mefarshim is the mushk, which comes from this animal, and afterwards it starts off as blood and then gets processed and it's turned into a perfume. V'hainu says the Alter Rebbe weiter, b'midas hanefesh, p'chines iskafia v'ishapcha, mimeriru lemiska. That concept of taking blood and turning it into a perfume is the concept of iskafia and ishapcha. Ki adam, who a nefesh achiyunish nefesh amisave, blood bichlal shaykh to the nefesh of Bahamas. The blood is what burns inside, what boils inside you when you have a taiva for something, and you're taking that blood, obviously the animal, but what it represents is the blood of yourself, of your taivas, ukshemahabich ta'avesov habahamiyis mitanuge yelam hazeh. When you turn over your taivas from worldly matters towards taivas for Hashem, that's pshat. We're taking the dam of the animal and turning it into boisa. So the made that the whole union of mushka, the whole union of moed of miradachia is taking the bad and being mevatel and turning it into kedusha, turning it into something holy. Val derech zed Alter Rebbe continues now. Yesh lefarish machlekes hapoiskim b'meir hanal. This is it's a maimer of Torah, but it's mamish going through a nigla also. Alter Rebbe brings in the maimer sherabeinu yoyna matira yafilu b'achila, as we saw earlier. Rabbeinu says it's mutter even to eat it. V'yesh oisim meister b'achila. Now those that say that's also to eat. Why? This svira lo shaloi nishapech ela reichoi. They say that you're allowed to smell from it. It's not treif, but the body, the essence, the substance of what it was blood. It's also now as well. Rabbeinu Yoina says it became completely heter. Which we learned earlier. This is the machlokes. The Rebbe now continues. What's the machlokes al bichsidis? If you're allowed to eat it or not, it's obvious that it's not as bad because you're allowed to smell from it. It's not treif mamish. So b'meila, just something that could be used in some kind of way. So what's the machlokes? It's totally b'inyan niskar b'gemara b'yuma gabi tshuva. Regarding about tshuva, a person that did avedis and then does tshuva, so the question is, what happens to avedis after he did tshuva? So the Gemara brings over there, in certain cases, sometimes when a person does tshuva on one level, so the avedis that he did b'mezid are now kivyachol only considered a shoygik. It's not as bad as it was originally, but sometimes even more than that the avedis turn into mitzvahs kazachias mamish. They're both the same concept. In both cases, whether the Avedis turned into a shoygig or into a schus, it started off as very, very bad and now it turned into something better. The question is, how much better did it turn into? And then the Alter Rebbe continues, and this is a little bit confusing part. Alter Rebbe says, Sharei Chaya yadua hanal, this Chaya that we mentioned, who yid'oini haniskar b'toira b'parasha shoftim. So now we have another name for this mushka. The name that Alter Rebbe says in Lashon Kodesh is the Yid'oini, which is used for kishuf. Shumi klipas atmeis, kameshakasav v'shoal oivi Yid'oini, v'shoal levidim derish alamesim. So Alter Rebbe here is telling us that this animal is meklipas atmeis. So here Alter Rebbe seemingly goes on both sides. Alter Rebbe is accepting the Rambam that we're talking about the mushka, which as far as he knows is the musk there. But then Alter Rebbe suddenly says, no, it's a chayat klipas atmeis. Based on we understand, the musk there is kosher. So what else could be an animal that could be this animal that Alter Rebbe is talking about? So there's two animals. That one of them is called a castorium. One is called a civet. As far as I know, they look like a beaver and a raccoon. But basically, there are these two animals. Both of them are also used in the perfume industry. Both of them, they have different parts of their bodies, whatever it is, that they take from that and they use it for perfumes. So it might be that the Rebbe is referring to these two animals, or one of these two animals that are used in the perfume industry, and that would be, and according to that would be the mushka of the Gemara as well. The mushka is not as far as with pashtus, it's the musk deer, but it maybe makes it one of these two animals. The problem is that the Alter Rebbe started off that the moedes has the chatoitis, these pods, and these two animals, even though they use their blood or something, I forget exactly what it is, they use it for smells. But as far as I know, there's no blood, there's no pods over here. I have to do more research into it maybe to see what it is. But Al Kopanim, the Alter Rebbe brings the svara that the Alter Rebbe says it's a non-kosher animal. So that's a very big shayla, and that's back we learned earlier, and we remember the Birchas Hanedim we started off with that Alter Rebbe brings over there that it's a suffix d'oraisa. Why is the suffix d'oraisa? We said because it was blood. So if it's a non-kosher animal, it's more geschmack. If it's a non-kosher animal, it's a suffix d'oraisa. It's mamish a non-kosher animal. If it's blood, even though blood's also issue d'oraisa, but now that the blood changed, Kopanim over there you could learn both ways. The Alter Rebbe continues and he says, V'lochin. When we say that the shita that says that you're allowed to eat it even means So we're talking about the level of tshuva that the bad completely turns into good, and that's why now the avedis are mitzvahs. This is what Chazal tell us. As we know the word that about tshuva, since he does tshuva, so now his avedis become into mitzvahs. So what ends up happening is that all of his avedis turn into mitzvahs. So he ends up having more mitzvahs than tzaddikim gemurim have. So that's one level, and the other shita says the tshuva shalemi averabba has denisem kishgogis. That if it's not the highest level of tshuva, so then even though Hashem forgives you for the avedus, and now they're not considered amazing, they're not considered a shoygig, but not considered good mamish. That's the reason of the other Amad Amar that says that even though it's that now that you're allowed to make the bracha on it, but it's not mutar ba'achila. So l'maskor machlokes, what level is the moir? According to Chassidus, is the moir on a level that is tshuva, the highest level of tshuva, at the avedis mamish turn into mitzvahs, or it's a lower level of iskafti of tshuva where the moir only turns into shgogis, but not as strong as it was before. Ad kan. Rabbi.